Hi, I'm Rosanne DeTorres from DeTorres and DeGeorge Family Law. And this video is about 4 things that every divorce settlement should include. The first thing that you should really try to cover is specific terms about alimony and child support. With regard to alimony, you want to make sure that that settlement agreement states how long the alimony will be paid for and how much the alimony is going to be. You want to include the assumptions that those support figures are based on. In other words, what income is being used to calculate the alimony and the child support amounts that are being used in the settlement agreement. If there is a bonus being paid, and it has been paid historically, you also want to say that and recite specifically what those historical bonus amounts have been. You want to set a benchmark within the agreement itself, within the 4 corners of the agreement, so that if there's ever a need to modify the terms of support, a court won't look outside the agreement for what the realities were, what the facts were. So you want that agreement to be very specific about what the assumptions were within the document itself, the financial assumptions underlying those support terms. You also want to make sure that you include when and how those support numbers may change. For example, as your circumstances change, you can build into an agreement specific events that will trigger a review or a possible modification of support, including a loss of a job, death, cohabitation, when children go off to college, child support may change. Other circumstances could come up that would require and trigger a change in your circumstance. If you're on the eve of retiring, for example, you may want to put that in as a specific change in your circumstance that will warrant and mandate that a review occur of support. When children are involved in support provisions, make sure that you include specific language about who pays for the extras, like activity expenses, daycare, summer camp, cell phones, and car insurance. Child support only covers the basics for a child, and it also actually does also cover extracurricular activity expenses, but most people try to negotiate obligations to pay for extracurricular activity expenses on top of the child support. Daycare, summer camp, not typically included in the child support obligation, so you want to add provisions for that. And cell phones and auto insurance, also not included. So if you have kids that are using phones or potentially going to be driving someday, most kids will, then you want to make provisions for those as well. The second thing or topic you want to include in any divorce settlement is the specifics about the custody and parenting provisions. When you and your spouse are getting along, you can be as flexible as you want. You'll never look at that agreement if you're getting along. The problem comes when there's a dispute about what should be happening with the kids. If you go back to your lawyer and say, what should I do in this circumstance? The first thing they're going to say to you is, what does your settlement agreement say? So it behooves you to be very specific about the custody and parenting schedule and any other issue that relates to your children, because in the event there is a dispute, you want to have some black and white language that covers those situations. So also, the higher conflict that you have in your relationship with your spouse, the more specific you want to be. More specifics means less opportunity for conflict. So the higher conflict, more specific you want to be. Don't forget to include a holiday and a school recess schedule. Also, think about who handles the kids when they're sick. Is it always going to be your responsibility to take off from work, or do you want to share that responsibility with your spouse? The third thing every marital settlement agreement wants to include is a distribution schedule for the assets and the debts. Specifics about those could include your house, all the bank accounts, your investment accounts, your retirement accounts, and all the debts that you may have, credit cards, loan or lease payments for your car, mortgages, outstanding bills as well. Don't forget also that if you are reaching an agreement where one of you is keeping the house, make sure that you have specific provisions in that agreement for your name to be taken off the mortgage on the house if your spouse is keeping the house. I can't tell you how many times I've seen settlements where one person keeps the house, but there's no provision made in the agreement for the other person's name to be taken off the mortgage, and then the spouse keeping the house doesn't pay, there's a foreclosure, and the spouse that didn't keep the house has ruined their credit as a result. So make sure that there's a refinance provision in there. Pay attention to provisions about credit cards. Hopefully you can liquidate all the debt through the divorce process by using assets to pay off all the debt so that everybody leaves the marriage without debt. But if you can't, you've got to make some provision about who's keeping what credit card debt. If they're all in one person's name, you can roll those debts onto a credit card in the other person's name. There's things that you can do, so make sure you pay attention to that. And the last thing I want to recommend to you is make very specific provisions about health insurance and life insurance. Health insurance can be very costly for a dependent spouse, but there are ways to stay on your spouse's health insurance program after divorce under certain circumstances. We can talk to you about what those specifics are. You also want to include provisions for how out-of-pocket medical expenses are going to be paid, and who's going to pay the deductibles. So make specific provisions for that. Make sure you also have specific provisions for who's maintaining the health insurance for any children that are involved. And with life insurance, we use life insurance as the most common way to secure support obligations. So if you have an alimony obligation, or you're receiving alimony, or you're paying or receiving child support, you're going to be required to maintain life insurance. If you're sick or have a disability, it's very hard to get life insurance, but there are other ways that we can create security so that if there is a premature death, there is not a loss of support in that eventuality. So those are the 4 things every divorce settlement should include. I'm Rosanne DeTorres with DeTorres and DeGeorge Family Law. Have a great day.